thank you very much, everyone, for joining today. I'm really thrilled. We've got Harriet Minter with us today. We're so lucky that she has made time in her busy lockdown schedule to join us. So really pleased to have you with us today, Harriet. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Sue McLean, and I'm chair of the SCL Women in Tech Law Group. I'm one of the SCL trustees and a partner at Baker McKenzie. And this is the first in a series we're launching during this period, where we have conversations with really interesting people who have particular expertise or insight. And we thought we would start talking about resilience and productivity during this challenging time for all of us. Harriet and I first met at a networking event around diversity and inclusion. We were at Mansion House and we were sat next to each other on a table, didn't know each other, but during the event we were actively tweeting, and I suddenly realized that the lady with the red hair on Twitter was sat right next to me. So I turned around to Harriet and started a conversation, and it turned out that we actually had quite a bit in common. Harriet started, or maybe Harriet will tell me that's not quite right, but one of Harriet's first jobs as a journalist was at Roll on Friday. So there was a legal link there, but she has
horrifying for lawyers. So I'm glad you didn't run away at that.
We love Roll on Friday and hate it in equal measure, depending on what the stories are on the particular day. I'm sure, as you recognise, Harriet. But yeah, Harriet has since then gone from strength to strength. She is a leading journalist and broadcaster specialising in female leadership. You may know that she founded and edited The Guardian's Women in Leadership section, which really was groundbreaking and focused on women in the workplace. And she still writes for them on women in tech. But she's now a columnist for Psychologies magazine. She hosts a fab podcast, the Badass Women's Hour on Talk Radio, which you may have heard. And she's written for a whole host of publications. You may have also seen, and I always enjoy this, Harriet, when I follow up on Twitter, she's quite often sparring with Piers Morgan on the sofa on interesting and potentially contentious issues, which is always interesting. And she's always got lots of great insights. So we're really delighted you're here with us today, Harriet. Harriet's going to talk, share some insights with us, and we're then going to open this up to Q&A. So if you've got questions, please do funnel them through the chat function, and I will help to moderate those with Harriet during the session. Lastly, just a reminder that SCL is an educational charity, and if you want to support SCL's great work, you can buy SCL a coffee, and we'll post the link in the chat. But after that, Harriet, thanks for joining us. How are you dealing with lockdown? Maybe you'll tell us during the session.
Thank you. I am dealing with lockdown. I'm okay, actually. What I've realised is that my 7-year-old self would have delighted in lockdown, because all I ever wanted to do was hide in a corner with a book. And lockdown has reignited my love of reading, and I haven't had to travel anywhere. I haven't had to talk to people I don't want to talk to. I've been able to do everything from my home. So my inner introvert has really enjoyed it. But the more extrovert side of me that I've grown over the years, that has cultivated to become an adult, has definitely been missing people and interaction and being able to debate and discuss things. So thank you very much for having me here today. And as Sue says, I don't know if any of you have ever seen me talk before or been to anything I've done before, but my favourite part of any talk is always Q&A. I absolutely love it. I'm a massive oversharer, so you can ask me absolutely anything. So I'm going to talk for a little bit, but what I will do is leave lots of time for Q&A at the end. So this talk is about how to be productive, which is a very ironic thing for me to talk about, because I actually describe myself quite honestly as being really quite incredibly lazy. I am a naturally lazy person. But what I'm also is a naturally ambitious person. And I realized very, very early on in my life that if I was going to achieve my ambitions while still being very lazy, what I was probably going to have to do is work out how to get super productive really fast. And it was a standing joke amongst all my friends throughout school and throughout university that I somehow seemed to do the least amount of work, generally always at the last minute, and yet still got through everything. And while we all laughed about it, what I realized as I got into the workplace and got older was that I naturally did things that productivity gurus were selling for millions of pounds. Now, obviously, had I been smarter, I would have realized there was a sales option there and made my millions, now be doing lockdown in the Bahamas. But so I have, as Sue said, I'm a journalist. I've spent 15 years, I think. I've been saying 15 years for a while now, so I'm not sure if it's more or less than. But I spent about 15 years as a journalist. And about 5 years ago, I had a bit of an early midlife crisis and decided I was done with journalism. I didn't want to do it anymore. And I was going to retrain and become a coach, because I had had a coach and it was absolutely life-changing for me, and I wanted to be able to do that for other people. So I retrained, and I quit my job in journalism, which was at the time at The Guardian, and probably most female journalists would have told you I had the best job in journalism at the time. And I was like, nope, I'm done, leaving. And I thought I was just going to be a full-time coach. And what happened was that within about a week of me leaving that job, I'd had the Times ring me up and see if I could write for them. I'd had Psychologies offer me a column, and I'd had the BBC Breakfast ask me if I wanted to come on and talk about female infertility with them, which I said I would do, but only if I could also say the phrase female sexual pleasure at 7 a.m. on the BBC. They couldn't find anything in the rules to stop that, so that's still the highlight of my career. And so what I ended up very quickly with was actually 2 jobs. So I was still a journalist and I was also a coach. And I realized that unless I set some real structures around how I worked, I was going to burn out really, really quickly. And so what I guess I want to share with you here today is probably 2 or 3 of the things that I have learned in that time that have really helped me. And in particular, a couple of those things look at working from home, because for most of us, this is a relatively new experience. Certainly when I left my full-time job and went freelance, I thought one of the biggest joys was going to be working from home. And I really quickly realized that unless I created some structure around that, I wasn't going to work from home so much as just watch a lot of Netflix from home. And also the other things I want to talk about is the concept of how we talk to ourselves about our own productivity, because we can be either our harshest critics or our biggest supporters. And the way we talk to ourselves about productivity almost directly influences then how productive we actually are. So I'm going to look at that a bit. But like I said, really happy to talk about anything and everything. So any questions, pop them in the Q&A or the chat. And as I'm going, if there's anything that isn't clear, please do ask. So the first thing I want to talk about when it comes to how to be productive in lockdown is that almost certainly being productive in lockdown does not look like either being productive at work does, or what we think of being productive is on Instagram. Neither of those are actually showing what productivity is. You are not productive if you are doing 8 hours of work a day at home. I can guarantee that. That's not your most productive. And also you are not productive if you've baked 3 banana loaves today. Okay, that's also not productive, although delicious, but not productive. Actually, when we're talking about the concept of working from home, of being in this strange situation that we're currently in, productivity really looks like the ability to manage our energy so that we prioritize the things that are important, we make sure we have enough space and time to look after ourselves, and we acknowledge that there are going to be certain things that we have to say no to. And that's what's in productivity. So it's prioritization, space and time for ourselves, and acknowledging that there are things we need to say no to. And my experience with lawyers is that actually sometimes you are not great at those 3 things. I'm going to be honest, I love you, but sometimes you want to do it all, you will put yourselves absolutely last to make sure it all gets done, and you will keep saying yes and taking on more work until there is no space and time left. And that's part of our busyness culture. So our busyness culture says that when anyone asks us, oh, how's work? The automatic response is, oh my God, so busy. Because we're fearful that if we're not busy, somebody's going to come along and say, well, hang on, if you're not that busy, do we really need you here? I've always thought it was really ironic that when anybody went part-time, we cut their salary in accordance with their hours. Because if any of you do part-time, you will know that if you try and do a 4-day week, you're still doing 5 days worth of work, you're just doing it in 4 days. So actually anyone who can do that is significantly more productive than the rest of us, and so should be paid more. But productivity is really, as I say, it's about looking at your priorities. And that's, for me, the first thing. And this idea of priorities comes from a guy called Stephen Covey, who wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think I've got that right. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a huge book. It's about that big. Thankfully, there are many, many, many articles on the internet summarizing it for you. But one of the things he looks at is the concept of priorities. And what he says is that actually in any given week, there are between 3 and 5 things that we absolutely must do. And that if we only did those 3 to 5 things, we would still have had a productive week that would have had impact and that would have moved our career and our work forward. But what happens is that we sort of identify those 3 to 5 things, we kind of know what they are, but then other stuff comes along. And so we slot the other stuff in it as well. Or somebody sends us an email and we think, oh, I must respond to this email. Or we see something in the news and we think, oh, I must talk about that. We get very easily distracted and we become reactive rather than productive. And so in Stephen Covey's mind, when we are reacting to circumstances, we are instantly less productive. So his theory goes that at the start of the week, you work out what the 3 to 5 things are that you want to do that week that are really important. You block out time in your calendar for them. And no matter what, that time is sacred. So if that means that somebody has popped up and said, it's really urgent, I need to have this now, you have to manage their expectations around when they're going to get it, because that time is sacred to your most important tasks. Now, this is obviously a lovely theory, right? It's a great theory. How nice we would all just be blocking out all our time and being like, nope, sorry, I'm going to spend all my time on these 3 things, nothing else of interest to me. It doesn't really work like that in practicality. You know, inevitably we get pushed around on stuff. But I wanted to give you a story about how it worked for me in lockdown. And as well as being naturally quite lazy, I'm also a natural procrastinator. So when I know that there is a task that I have to do, I will find anything I possibly can to do instead. I will, I'm not naturally tidy. I will tidy the house. I will do serious investigative research on an unsolved murder from 1962, anything that allows me to stay away from the task in hand. And so I read about the Stephen Covey rocks theory, and I was like, okay, what I'm going to do is put my priorities in place for the next couple of weeks. I'm going to block out time. I'm only going to work on those things. And what happened was that my number 1 priority a few weeks ago was to finish a book proposal. Ironically, the book proposal was about being productive while working from home. And all I had to do was, it was probably about 2,000 words, which for somebody who's a professional writer, I should be able to do that in a morning maximum. And I blocked it out for Monday morning and I didn't do it. And I read the paper and I checked my email and I probably answered some stuff on Twitter and I gazed out the window and I thought about what my dog might be thinking about at that moment and all these other things. But I didn't do it. And I said, it's okay because I've got more time blocked out elsewhere in the week. So I'll just shift this one down and I'll do it at a later time. So of course I shifted that priority, which meant the other priorities following it also had to shift. And I got to the next time I'd blocked out, which I think was on the Wednesday. And I didn't do it. And I procrastinated on it and I sat on it and it was not happening. And I couldn't understand what's going on because while I am somebody who is a natural procrastinator and I am somebody who's quite lazy, ultimately I'm quite good at getting stuff done when it has to be done. And this thing I could not do. And I sat with it for a while and I asked myself, why is this not happening? And I realized it wasn't happening for 2 reasons. First reason was that I was putting too much pressure on it to be perfect. It's a big problem for lawyers, I know, because you put a comma in the wrong place and suddenly you're on the hook for hundreds of millions of pounds. But the pressure we put on ourselves to be perfect often gets in the way of our productivity. So sometimes just getting something done and then setting aside a separate time to go back and check it can really enhance our productivity. We can say, okay, well, I'm only giving myself an hour to do this. I know it's not going to be perfect in an hour, but in an hour I can get 70% of the way there. And that 70% is good enough right now. And I can come back and look at it again. And the second reason that I wasn't getting this done was because I was tired. And we don't tend to give ourselves a break when we're tired. And we don't tend to give ourselves a break when we are working from home. Because we go, well, I can't be tired, right? I haven't had to do my commute. I got home at a very good time yesterday because I was already in my house. I probably had a good night's sleep. I've had a very nice breakfast. I went for a little walk this morning. All of these things perhaps are not part of our daily life generally. So we assume we cannot be tired. And what that assumption means is that we then don't actually give ourselves the time we need to rest. And rest does not just mean taking a nap. Naps are great. I thoroughly endorse them. If you have not used this opportunity to have a little post-lunch siesta, I really do it today. It's wonderful. But rest actually means giving our brains a break from the task in hand. David, yes, naps are great. They really are. They're so great. But giving our brains a rest from the task in hand. And what's happened to a lot of us in lockdown is that we have gone into essentially our working life mode, but just in a different space. So what that means is that we get up, we have some breakfast, and we go to work, and we work really, really hard. We don't get the natural breaks that we would do in an office. So in an office, you might stand up and go for a little walk, get yourself a cup of coffee, move around a bit. Probably do it more often than you will when you're at home. Time yourself at home. In an office, you might have somebody pop past your desk and say, oh, can I have a quick chat with you about something? You might have a bit of a laugh with them. They might ask you to think about another problem. You might have somebody send around an email saying, hey, has everyone seen this thing in the news? You'll move your brain onto the news to look at that. What you're doing is you're giving your brain regular rests from the task in hand. When we are at home, our level of concentration is much, much higher. So we tend to be really focused on one thing. If you've got kids, you've probably found one spot in the house that you've designated as the office and you're not allowing them in. So the fear of moving anywhere else is so great, we don't move. And we don't give our brain enough rest. So if you're finding that you are unproductive in lockdown, please, first of all, think about how you can rest. And rest could be a nap, but it could also be several other things. And here are some examples for you. The concept of creative rest. So can you go and do something which is in some way, shape or form a creative activity? You're still active, you're still moving around, you're still doing something, but your brain is calm and quiet and relaxed. There's a reason why things like drawing has taken off so much in lockdown, gardening, so many of us are gardening. I don't know if anyone's taken up things like painting or pottery or anything like that, but any form of creative activity gives your brain time and space to rest. There is community rest, which is go and spend time with other people. Ideally not work people. This is the chance you have to do that when you're in an office. You've only got work people. This is your chance to go and talk to your neighbour, talk to your kids, talk to your other half. I know maybe you've had enough of them now, but you're stuck with them for a while, so you might as well find a way to like them. Go and talk to somebody else. Find a part of a community that you can be a part of and get involved with it. It really gives back to us. And it gives our brain that rest it needs to then go back to the task in hand. And my final suggestion is what's called physical rest. And the obvious example of this is exercise. So go and do some exercise. Doesn't have to mean you have to train for a marathon. Go for a walk around the block. 7 minutes basically is the amount you need for your brain to feel rested. But it can also mean stand up from your desk and give yourself a bit of a shakeout. It can mean put some music on and have a bit of a dance around your home office. Something that gets you out of your head and into your body. Again, switches your brain off, gives it time and space to rest. So productivity, when we're thinking about it, some simple tips. First of all, think about Covey's rocks theory. How do you prioritize the important things? Put them in your diary, block out the time, try and say no to other stuff. Somebody said the other day, which I loved, which is prioritization is sacrifice. So if you are going to prioritize some things, you have to say no to others. Get comfortable with that. And then think about really, what do you need to feel fully rested? And if you cannot concentrate, if you find your productivity is slumping, know that that is a sign that your body needs more rest. One of the key signs of burnout is when our productivity falls off a cliff. So burnout is essentially what happens when we forget for too long that we are human and that we have very basic human needs, like a glass of water every 4 hours, food at regular intervals, fresh air, movement, connection with other human beings. When we don't build enough of those into our lives, our resilience starts to drop. And the more it drops, the lower our productivity goes. And I say this and it sounds like I'm saying you should look after yourself purely so that you can be an absolute on-it machine at work. That is an advantage. That is an advantage. Look after yourself. You'll find work easier. You'll find it more enjoyable. Your colleagues will appreciate you more. But also the other advantage is that you'll be able to switch off easier. I don't know if anyone has found this working from home, that actually it's really hard to switch off, that you don't have that delineation between work and home. When we look after ourselves properly, we give ourselves the strength to be able to see where that line is, to be able to start saying, actually, I have to put a stop here and cross into life now and leave work behind. And the final thing I would say on that is that when we're looking after ourselves and we're thinking about how we take care of our mind, body, soul, and our productivity within that, that means that sometimes you have to put yourself first. Any of you living alone at the moment, maybe you've really learnt this. Maybe it's something you've really had to notice in the last 3 months, that because there is nobody there for you to put first instead, you have had to put yourself first. That is a great life lesson. Those of you who are living with families, maybe you find that everything about the family is coming above you as a person. This is the time to remember that old cliche about when you're on an aeroplane and the aeroplane is crashing, you put your own oxygen mask on first. If you do not have enough of that oxygen, you can't help anyone else around you. So put your own oxygen mask on first. Think about what it is you need to feel that you are being looked after and cared for. This is slightly easier said than done, because my standard oxygen mask on first activity is to go and get a massage. Not happening at the moment. Or to go and get my hair done, also not happening at the moment, although believe me, I am on the waiting list for my hairdressers the second it opens. But think about what you can put in place instead and how you can boost your own resilience. And I'm going to tell you one final story before I end and open it up to Q&A, which is about the concept of resilience. So about 6 years ago, just pre my early midlife crisis, I was working incredibly hard in a very big organization. And my team in that organization had been told that it was going to go through a restructure and that lots of us were going to be made redundant. And the first thing that happened was that the whole management team just disappeared overnight and were replaced by a new management team. And I was doing my very best in that situation to try and influence the new managing director. So I was trying to make them like me. I was trying to make them think I was a great person, that they wanted to keep me on, because I was very aware that I was quite high up on the chopping block. Is that the right word? High up on the chopping block? Something like that. High up on the chop list, whatever. And so I was spending a lot of time doing things that I thought they would like. I was designing presentations for them. I was building spreadsheets. I was coming up with new ideas. But nothing I did was really getting through. And I was frustrated. At the time, I was running a section called Women in Leadership. The new managing director was a woman. She was a leader. I thought, oh, we're going to get on like that. But it didn't quite work. And one day I was doing that thing that you do, or that we used to do actually, when you first opened your inbox of the morning and you would go through all your emails and delete the ones that you'd signed up for somewhere along the line but you didn't want to read. Everyone remember doing that pre-GDPR? And I saw one which said in the subject line, how to be more resilient. I thought, oh, that's good. I need a bit of that. I'm up for some resilience. Great. And it was actually a day's course. It was happening that Sunday. It was run by the School of Life. If anyone knows the School of Life, if you don't, do go check them out. I think they still run the course. I recommend it. And I went along that Sunday, and it taught me something that I have gone back to again and again and again, and that has never failed me. And it taught me this. It taught me that resilience is like an adventure story. And every adventure story runs off the same pattern. So if you are a fan of adventure films, I'm really sorry, this is about to ruin them for you for life now. But they all have the same structure. And the structure is called something, it's called the hero's journey. I think the hero's journey in full is about 28 stages, but you can kind of break it down to about 5. And it goes like this. So first stage is the hero or heroine. And second stage is the quest, something they have to complete. And they're really excited about this quest. They're really excited for it. So they pack a rucksack filled with all their skills. They throw the rucksack on their back and they head off out into the big wide world to complete this quest. And they're walking along the road and they're so excited to be on the road that they fail to see part 3, which is a whacking great pothole. And they fall down the pothole down to the bottom. And they're down there at the bottom of the pothole, like shouting for help, trying to climb their way out, and nothing they do is working. They're stuck there. And eventually they remember their rucksack filled with all their skills, and they unpack that rucksack and start using those skills. However irrelevant those skills seem to the situation, they put them into practice. And when they do that, part 4 happens. And part 4 is really interesting because it happens in every adventure story. And if you like an adventure film, and if you've ever had that thing in an adventure film where you see a really famous actor at the beginning and then they disappear and you're like, surely they haven't got them just in for 5 minutes, and then they reappear, you will know part 4. Part 4 is where a mystery stranger appears from the mists, rescues the hero or heroine, and puts them back on the road to part 5, which is success and completing the quest. Now, when I heard this story, I mean, I absolutely loved it. I thought it was just hilarious and great and a fantastic metaphor. I mean, I also thought it was absolute rubbish. So I thought it was great, but completely impractical and in no way going to help the situation that I was currently in. But anyway, I took it away with me, and that Monday I went into the office and I sat down at my desk and I thought, you know what, today I'm not going to do any of the stuff that has not been working for me. I'm not going to do those presentations. I'm not going to do those spreadsheets. Today, I'm just going to do the things that I'm good at. I'm just going to use my skills. And I thought, what are my skills? What am I good at? And I thought, well, I'm good at interviewing people and I'm good at persuading people that they should be interviewed. So that's what I'm going to do. So I wrote a list of people that I wanted to interview. And at the top was a woman who was the CEO of a really big advertising agency. And I rang her up and I got through and I explained what I was doing. And she said, okay, I'll let you interview me. But if we're going to do this interview, I want to talk about 2 things that I've never spoken about publicly before. Now, as a journalist, you hear that and you're like, cha-ching, lottery, yes. So I'm like, yeah, great, fine, definitely do that. Okay, what I want to talk about is what it's like to be CEO of an international organisation when you have breast cancer, and what it's like to be CEO of an international organisation when you go through 10 rounds of IVF. Oh, wow, okay, fine, great, thank you. So we did the interview. Her name was Carrie Hindmarsh. The interview is still on the Guardian website if you want to read it. And I published this interview, and 24 hours later, my new boss appeared at the side of my desk. And she said to me, Harriet, I just wanted to say, well done on that interview with Carrie Hindmarsh. I really enjoyed it. And oh, thanks, glad you liked it. And she said, yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. And actually, I read it because Carrie sent it to me. Because Carrie is actually my former mentor and one of my very best friends. And she sent it to me with a note saying that your section is the best thing she's seen in journalism in 10 years. And if I can't make a success of it, I'm a damn fool. So we better make a success of it then, haven't we? Now, obviously, if I'd been a better journalist and done more research, I would have realised they knew each other, but I didn't know that. I just did what I was good at. And the boost of doing what I was good at that time saved my job. But it also reminded me of where my skills lie, of the stuff that makes me happy, of the worth and value that I have simply by turning up and being me. And when we are going through tough times, when our resilience is being drained from us, it can be hard, it can be easy to forget those things. So when you need a boost, when your resilience needs that lift, ask yourself, what do I love doing that I am good at? What do I love doing that I am good at? And go and do some of that stuff for a little bit and just see what happens. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Harriet. And I think Simon has shared the link to the article, which is very good. Thank you, Simon, in the chat. And I love that story. And it strikes me that, well, for my own sake, and perhaps this is also true of you, Harriet, and maybe others that are involved in the call, that I do find that having something where I feel real purpose in what I'm doing makes me much more productive, and actually mixing it up. So I found at the beginning of lockdown, it was incredibly busy at work because everyone was trying to, move on to a sort of virtual schedule, but there was still a lot of business as usual stuff. But then there was all the other stuff that comes with the lockdown in terms of managing people and keeping in touch with clients. But actually, this, trying to find things that I enjoy doing as well as my work, so things like getting involved in SCL, really has helped me be motivated to keep going. And I'm sure there's probably others in the group that have things they typically do that they find a lot of that gives them purpose, but maybe they haven't been able to do. And I would encourage people to just dive into those things again, because it can help you more generally.
Ideas about what we think we should be doing. So we think, in order for people, so one of the things I've seen a lot of recently is people going, well, in order for my team to think I'm being productive, I must be online all the time. And I'm like, well, if you were in the office, would you be online all the time? Would you be answering emails instantly? And they'll go, oh no, because when I'm in the office, I know that I need 2 hours to focus on a piece of work. So I just put my out of office on, or I don't check my emails. I don't look at them. Okay, so why then have you left the office and gone, well, oh no, I'm going to work in this really different way that actually I don't like? Or I've seen people say, oh, actually, I'm really good in person. I'm really good in person. I like talking to people in person. I'm like, okay, well, pick up the phone and talk to them. Or say, can we hop on a quick Zoom call? Rather than drafting an 8-paragraph email, which you hate and you hate sending and they hate receiving. So sort of going back to actually what's the stuff that we're good at reminds us, particularly when we're feeling a bit drained and a bit tired, it reminds us, oh no, I do have value. I do add to things. I am good at this. And it just gives us that boost again.
Yeah, no, I must say, I think at the beginning of lockdown, we were very conscious but not bothering people, or only bothering people with important information that they might find useful. And I think what we found quite quickly was people missed human contact. So actually, people who are very good at client relationships or building connections with people, just get on the phone and talk to them and ask them, how are they? Talk about their life, see how they're getting on. And a lot of people have got a lot to add there, because they're very good at those kind of relationship building conversations.
I remember a friend of mine saying to me earlier on that lockdown for her was the return of the unscheduled phone call. But suddenly she'd be like, oh, I just fancy talking to someone. So she'd pick up the phone. She's like, the person on the other end would be like, oh my God, who is this? Why are you calling me? But there's something even just about, kind of that check-in culture, that let me just drop you a quick message, let me just drop you a quick chat, that is about saying it's not just because where you do your work has changed, the way you do it and what you're brilliant for within it doesn't have to also have disappeared.
Yep. So Absolutely. So I'm going to try and run through a few questions, and then I've got some more of my own, and I'm sure people will pop up. Somebody said, I've worked home for years, but I was surprised to find that, I mean, this is not normal working from home, right? Because we're working from home in a crisis. And this individual said, look, I've actually found myself making a deliberate point of being a bit more formal than I would normally, like putting my sort of dress uniform on. And do you think that's important? Because I suspect all of us have got those days where, we've got early calls and maybe you don't want it to be a Zoom because you don't want everyone to see you in your informal gear, or maybe even your pajamas sometimes. But actually having that, I'm going to get showered, I'm going to get properly dressed. It can be comfortable clothes, but I feel like I've kind of put my work uniform on to get myself in the right headspace. Do you think that's important?
Yeah, I mean, I think whatever works for you. So one of the really great things about this period in time is that it gives us all an opportunity to understand what's the stuff that I need in order for my energy levels to be maintained. So one of the things that's really, when I started working from home, that became really apparent to me very quickly was that it'd be really easy for me to never leave the house. Just really, really easy. And actually I need some fresh air every day, even if it's only 5-10 minutes. Another thing is that it became really important to me to have breakfast, lunch, dinner, because otherwise it would be very easy for me not to eat until like 4 o'clock. And so those things that would be kind of forced breaks if I was in an office, I had to say to myself, actually, do I need these? And if the answer is yes, then I'm going to put them in. So if getting dressed for work makes you feel like, okay, I'm in a different headspace now, and if changing out of that outfit at 5 p.m. makes you go, okay, now I'm in another headspace, great, do it. Absolutely do it. The other thing to remember is, you just sort of touched on this, is that like, we're not working from home in normal times. We're working from home in the midst of a global crisis. And so even if you are, and I've had lots of people feeling a bit guilty about this, about saying, actually, I feel tired or I feel stressed, because, they haven't been directly impacted by what's going on. But even if you haven't been directly impacted, it's impossible for most of us as humans not to be picking up on the level of stress that's in the world at the moment. It's impossible for us not to be affected by the news, not to be affected by how our family are feeling, how our neighbours are feeling. And so we are all going through a form of global trauma. And one of the side effects of any form of trauma is tiredness. So actually, we are all going to be more tired. We are going to have less energy, simply because of what's going on in the world.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I feel that it's kind of been emotionally exhausting. And I did read a poll the other day, or some article the other day, that said women are generally more likely to be worriers than men. And they'd done some survey and said, were women worried about, and men and women worried about, recession, impact of COVID long term, to their family, to themselves, to society. And then we've had a lot of other things, I think, that have been big things happening recently. Yeah. Like the terrible events in America, or we've got Brexit, looming for business. I think it's natural that this is just quite a time that's full of anxiety, whether it's your family might be ill, or just these broader sort of geopolitical issues. I think that's right. And one thing I've found helpful actually is, I've got this study, but I do find that if I stay in here all day, I'm not particularly productive. So I do move around where I'm working.
Yeah.
And I think I'm also a procrastinator like you. I think lawyers are quite often like, we need deadlines. Like, yeah, we'll jump to meet a client, but if there's no deadline, that's quite hard for us to set our own deadline. So I must say, I'm a bit like you in that sometimes I think if I've got a blank sheet of paper, say if I have to write an article or a chapter that I've promised somebody ages ago, a bit like your book proposal, I find it really hard to start. So sometimes I start in front of the television because I'm not really properly concentrating on it. Then I just kind of throw something at a page while the telly's on in the background, and then I've got two sides, and then tomorrow I'll actually properly do it. But I'm not starting with nothing. That's the bit I find hard.
That's the thing to remember, which is, if it works for you, great, do it. That's really all that matters here.
Yeah. Someone said, and I think maybe I'll go to this one next. Obviously, you now trained as a coach and you've had a coach, do you think it was working with a coach that really, did that really give you confidence to change career paths?
Oh gosh.
Or do you think you would have been able to do it anyway? How helpful was that?
No, I probably would have been able to do it anyway, but it would take me about another 5 to 10 years, and I would have been really miserable for most of them. I am it's sort of disingenuous to me to say, because I obviously make a living out of it, but I'm a massive, massive fan of coaching. I found it life-changing for me, and everyone I work with so far, touch wood, has found it really deeply impactful for them. So I think particularly for sort of smart, thoughtful, I'm using educated in the kind of like quite high achieving people. So people who at about 13, 14, 15, your parents realized you're a bit smart and they were like, great, potential gold mine here. Let's really go for it. Go get as many A's as you can. Go to a greatest university as you can. Go to get a biggest job as you possibly can. All of this stuff. Quite often there's a lot, you're on a bit of a treadmill. And what you don't get is the time to say, actually, I'm going to step off the treadmill for a minute and really have a think about who I am and what I want to do and what's going to be most interesting for me. And what coaching gave me was that space to go, hang on, let's take a step back and think about whether I really do want to be a journalist. And if I do, what does that look like and how do I do it? Or am I just a journalist because, and this was the case as it turned out, am I just a journalist because right now I'm Harriet Minter of The Guardian and that's giving me a certain kudos at dinner parties? And and that's nice. It's nice to be able to go to a dinner party and everyone goes, oh, that's so interesting, tell me what you do. But it's not enough to feed your soul for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I found it hugely, hugely impactful. And I mean, I'm always happy to talk to people and or recommend other coaches as well. But yeah, I mean, I probably would have changed careers, but it would have taken me much, much longer to get there.
Yeah, I must say, I had a coach probably about 6 years ago, and we had very nice chats for a few weeks, and then we really kind of got down to business. And she said, well, really, what do you want to achieve? And at the time I was a senior lawyer. I was off counsel at my law firm, but I really was frustrated and I wanted to be a partner and it wasn't quite happening for me. And she said, well, you've got to set a goal, right? So if you don't make partner this year, what are you going to do? And I said, oh, well,
yeah.
I don't know. I'll think about it at the time. And, maybe I'll think about moving somewhere else. Yeah. And she said, no, what are you going to do? You've got to make a decision, otherwise you'll never, you've got to kind of commit to it in your own head. So I said, okay, I will leave. And she said, and you mean it? And she said, yes. I said, if it doesn't happen for me in the next 12 months, I will leave because that's what I know that's the next step for me. And that's what I want to achieve. And saying that out loud to her and knowing I'd made that commitment out loud to somebody else was actually extremely helpful because that was my goal for the year. And I put all my focus into that. And in the end, it made me think, actually, I'm not sure this is the right place for me, even if I do make partner, for me to continue to, grow my practice. It's not the right environment for what I want to do. And so I find those the conversations I had with her and the focus she helped me put on my own career really helpful, because you'll have people at work who are interested and supportive, and you might have a husband or a girlfriend or family that are supportive, but ultimately no one cares as much about your career as you. And you kind of need to take, and I finally took charge of it with her help. So I would always encourage people to it's that independent, somebody who's actually there to listen to you and help you think, which you could always do by yourself, but I think it's just a lot harder. Well, you make excuses, you make excuses and stuff.
Yeah, and also you've got somebody to point out, hang on, you've just said this thing, which sticks the thing you said beforehand. So tell me, when we're just in our own minds, we tend to think we're right most of the time. So it's helpful to have somebody just be like, oh, just noticed you said something there. Did you mean that? And also it's helpful to have somebody on your team, right? That's really important to have somebody who's there so that when you say, this is what I'm going to do, and then you take a step towards it and you're like, oh my God, it's a bit scary, or you do something and it goes wrong, you've got somebody that there say, no, it's okay, well, we just refocus, we go again. What else do we need to do? What else can we think about? And so on and so forth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The next question I get is a really interesting one, I think. And I've seen during lockdown, actually, people being much more open, which I think has been super helpful, because we're all ultimately in the same boat, is how is it okay to tell people you're not feeling okay, particularly if you're a sort of team leader and people are depending on you? This person says it can feel like a failure to admit that you're finding it really hard yourself. What do you think about that kind of showing vulnerability as a leader?
Yeah. So first of all, it's absolutely okay to say you're not feeling okay. In fact, it is not okay to not say that you're feeling not okay. So yes, definitely do say. I always say we're very into the idea of authenticity and vulnerability in leadership at the moment. I think there is a time and a place for it. So, because what happens is when we are honest with how we're feeling, we're honest with what we're going through, after we've done that, what we're left with is what an amazing thinker called Brené Brown calls a vulnerability hangover, which is where we've been really open and honest about something, and then suddenly we go, oh my God, should I have said it to that person? What are they going to think of me? And we sort of, that real kind of, that fear, the hangover fear, that's what we get. So what I'd say is, yes, absolutely talk to people about it. But we want to have proper conversations, right? So we don't want to have the conversations which go, how are you? And we go, actually, do you know what? It's been a tough week, but I'm okay. I'm getting through it and I'm fine. That's not vulnerability. So there are layers here. So the first layer is actually having that, finding somebody on your level that you can have a really open, honest and vulnerable conversation with. And if you don't think that's anybody at work and you don't think that's anybody at home, please call one of the amazing helplines, so Mind or stress.org.uk. Hire a coach, go see a therapist, all those people who can just be there to listen to you. It makes a huge difference. And then the second part is, can you be vulnerable with your team? I think absolutely yes, but with the acknowledgement that they're also going through stuff as well. So part of you being a leader is making sure that you have your support network set up properly so that you feel thoroughly supported, so that you're able to be honest with your team, but you're not relying on your team for that support. So it's almost a bit of a ladder approach. Your team are going to be looking to you for that support. And I think they personally will get a lot out of feeling like they're not alone. So if they're coming to you and saying, I'm feeling really stressed and I feel like everything I do isn't good enough and I'm overwhelmed and the situation just seems insane, having somebody who can say, do you know what? I feel that too. Yeah, I felt that too. I've been where you are. I know how that feels. That's a really beautiful gift to be able to give somebody. That's empathetic leadership. What isn't leadership is then turning to the person who said this to you and going, and I just don't know how I'm going to deal with it. And I don't know if I'm going to get out of bed tomorrow. And we're all going to hell in a handcart, aren't we? So there's nothing good here, because that's not what they need. And you are entitled to those feelings, but you have to take those feelings elsewhere and find somebody else who can support you in them, who's on your level, who doesn't need anything from you. And that for me is the understanding of empathetic leadership. So understanding how to be with somebody when they're going through a tough time, but also fundamentally knowing how to support yourself enough that you are still able to lead.
Absolutely, that sounds great. And connected to that, someone saying, what do you think are the top 3 things a good women leader or any leader can do to lead a team during this time?
These are going to be off the top of my head. So if I had time to think about it, I don't know if they'd be top 3, but these are the first ones that come to me. So the first one is listen. And I think actually good leaders do that generally anyway, or they should do that anyway. So listen, and really, really properly listen until you understand what the other person's saying, and check that you understand it. Because how you feel about the current situation is not going to be how somebody else feels about it. And how you feel about it today is not going to be how they feel about it tomorrow. How they feel about it tomorrow is not going to be how they feel about it in a week's time. So listen and keep checking in on that listening. The second thing is a level of honesty, and maybe the better word here is integrity. So I think what we have experienced so far is a lot of stress about the global situation. I think what people are going to start to experience very, very soon is a lot of stress about their own personal situations. So am I still going to have a job? Am I still going to be employable if I don't have a job? Where am I going to go? What's going to happen in terms of money, etc., etc. And I think acknowledging that those are going to be the really big issues that come up, and that as leaders, sometimes you're not going to be able to give people either a completely clear or a completely honest answer. So if you're in a senior leadership position and you know that a certain number of people are going to be made redundant, but you don't know how many that is, and you don't know if that's going to impact your team, and those decisions haven't been made, it's not, in my opinion, responsible leadership to then say to your team, well, of course there will be redundancies, but you can say to them, do you know what, it is difficult times, trying to predict the future is not going to be in any of our best interests. Come back to the here and now. What can you do here and now? How can I support you right here, right now? What do you do there? So act with a level of integrity with your team. Don't tell them it's all going to be fine if it's not. Don't tell them it's all going to be terrible if you don't know that for certain, etc. And then finally, this one actually I think probably should be first, but finally, and I've said this the whole way through, look after yourself. So put your oxygen mask on first. Go back to, what do I need? What's going to be good for me? How do I look after myself? Because if you are not at least at 60 to 70% capacity, you are not going to be able to brilliantly lead a team in crisis. So great leaders in crisis are, in my opinion, the ones who know how to manage and look after themselves first.
Yeah, and I think communication is absolutely vital, and that's what I'm sure lots of leaders have kind of been very mindful of during this period, how to get that communication right, how to make sure it's frequent enough but not overwhelming, keeping in touch with the team, etc. The one thing on a kind of more positive note as well, I think during this time, is it has given opportunities, and I think within teams it's given opportunities for particularly the more junior members of the team to actually make an impact in an area that they're interested in, because none of us are going anywhere, right? So in terms of opportunities to build relationships, better relationships with particular clients or contacts, or write an article, or host an event like this and kind of get your name out there, there's opportunities there as well, I think, that we should be looking out for our teams, to the extent that they're interested and they want to do these things. So
there's always an understanding that some people will be in that space and some people will be in the crisis space, and
yes,
that's actually the really interesting thing about being a leader in a time of crisis, is that all crisis comes with opportunity, always, always, always. And some people will, their instant response to a crisis will be to look for the opportunity, and some people's instant response will be, how do we fix the crisis and return things to normal? And it's about understanding that you're almost certainly going to have both of those in your team. So how do you support both of them?
Yeah, and I think listening and understanding what people are going through is so important. Somebody was telling me the other day, there's a lot of young people who are not getting married this summer that were expecting to get married, and so there's that disappointment. There's other people who may have autism or other conditions where actually they're just finding this isolation, kind of remote working, lockdown, extremely hard to manage. And we're not necessarily, as lawyers, as Harriet may know, we're not necessarily trained in people management to the extent that maybe we need to be, and so we're kind of all learning as leaders how best to manage this unusual situation. But getting how you communicate well with your team, it's kind of a learning process for a lot of us, I think. We've got 4 minutes. I don't know if anyone else has popped up with a question. The one thing that I think your story tells me, and has always stuck with me, is that you are an ambitious person, but the kind of concept of proceed until apprehended. You said to me, and it's sort of, asking for forgiveness, not permission. It's a sort of big part of your story, and I wondered if there's anything you could share with the team there, in terms of how you have that sort of confidence, particularly if you're maybe a more junior person, in terms of how do you achieve what you want to achieve? How do you get people on side to make sure that you can make the impact you want to make?
So I think, first of all, it's about being really clear about what's the impact I want to make and why do I want to make it. Because I think people sniff out, not insincerity, but they sniff out kind of self-motivation versus excitement and enthusiasm. So if you want to make an impact because you are just super motivated on getting to the top, and it's just the next rung on the ladder, and you could be in any job anywhere doing anything, but all you want is to be at the top of the tree. People sniff that out really quickly, and generally they don't like it. And I'm not saying that they should like it, or that they shouldn't, or there's something wrong about them, or that actually that level of ambition isn't bad, not at all, but know that that's going to be harder then to win people over. Whereas when we are, what in coaching terms we would call working on purpose, so when we're doing something that we love and we're good at, that we genuinely feel a passion and excitement for, people feel that passion and excitement when we're talking about it, and that's very magnetic. People want to then work with us, they want to be part of it, it brings people towards you. And so my first question would be, well, if you want to make an impact, really think about, what do you feel passionate about that you know you're good at, and start in that place and see about how you can expand that, because just talking about that with people will get them excited and want to help you. And then the other thing is, I do really believe, as you said, my kind of mantra is proceed until apprehended. You know, that works for me, honestly. Like when I follow the rules for stuff, it generally does not work. It's always when I have to circumnavigate something that then it works out. I think that's about practice. Honestly, I think it is about practice. I think it's about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I'll give you kind of, just to finish, I'll give you my favorite story on this, which is about yoga. So a few years ago, my then flatmate came home one day and was like, great news, I've just bought us 10 yoga classes for £10 on Groupon. We start on Sunday. And I was like, I've never done yoga. I've never expressed any desire to do any yoga. I don't know why you've done this, but okay, fine. And so we went to this yoga class on the Sunday, and she thought she had bought us beginners yoga, and she'd actually booked us into advanced power yoga. If anyone has ever been to an advanced power yoga class, it is hell. It's really, really hard. And I was sort of halfway through this class, and I was like bright red, I was sweating, it was horrible. I was so embarrassed, I was absolutely humiliated. And then about another 5 minutes in or so, the teacher's like, everyone lie down on your back and go into a shoulder stand, going into the relaxing part, go into shoulder stand. And I just couldn't, my stomach muscles are not equipped to lift the weight of my bottom. It just doesn't work. And so this teacher came over and she grabbed me by the ankles and she's like, do you want to go into a shoulder stand? I was like, oh, okay, fine. So she lifts my ankles above my shoulders. And I'm just stuck in the shoulder stand, basically suffocating because my boobs are so big that they've like fallen on me. I can't breathe. And I'm snorting like a pig and everyone's looking at me. It's just absolutely awful. And eventually the class is over and I leave and I'm like, that's it, I'm never going back. And then sort of the next week, for some reason, I'd had some sort of amnesia about how terrible it was. So I was like, okay, well, I'll go to another one and I'll just see. And I went back next week and it was equally terrible and nothing had got better and I was still humiliated for the whole thing. And yet I kept going back and kept going back and kept going back. And the more I went back, even though I got no better at yoga whatsoever, and kind of 7 years later, I'm still no better at it, my ability to deal with how embarrassing that was just absolutely rose. And then my ability to deal with being uncomfortable because I wasn't very good at something, or I wasn't in the right place at the right time, or I didn't look the right way, or I didn't sound the right way, or I hadn't said the right thing, that rose as well. And that ability to be comfortable with discomfort, that's what then allows us to take risks.
Yeah, and I love that. And I really took that on board. I mean, meeting you and you telling me that and starting to think about what I hate doing. And I really don't like public speaking. So talking to you is lovely, but in front of an audience, it's very nerve-wracking for me. So I just took that mantra on board and started saying yes. Yeah. Say yes, worry later, proceed until apprehended. And as you say, the muscle, every time it just doesn't seem quite as bad, and then you're going to get used to that level of discomfort. But if you don't, and you don't push yourself, whether it's to move jobs or go for that promotion or speak on a webinar or whatever, you don't move forward. So I love that. So everyone remember that, proceed until apprehended. So that brings us up to we have one final question, maybe we can just squeeze it in at the end. Who are your heroines, Harriet? Who would you love to interview, maybe, that you haven't yet?
Yeah. So obvious one, Michelle Obama, Oprah. But actually, a woman that I'm going to big up here, you won't have heard of her, but she's amazing. She's an absolute heroine of mine. She's called Taban Sharesh, and she runs a charity called the Lotus Flower. And basically her family are Iraqi by heritage. She was brought up in the UK, and one day she decided she was going to go back to Iraq and just learn about her own heritage. And she did, and she saw what was happening to women and girls in Iraq, Afghanistan, Iran, and she was like, this is not okay, I'm going to fix it. And just like that was it, she's like, not okay, I'm going to fix it. Went home, gathered all the possessions together, sold all her stuff, picked up her life, moved out there, and set up a camp, I think Afghanistan, I'll check, but I think that was her first one, for female refugees, and taught them how to box. And that was the first, she was like, that's what I'll do, I'll teach them how to box, that'll help them. And now she's grown it into a full charity, and it's absolutely amazing. She's a big heroine of mine.
Fab. And we'll share on the SCL, maybe Women in Tech Law page, details of Lotus Flower. And also there's an event I know next week that Womankind Worldwide, that I know that you know, Harriet, are doing, which is talking about the impact of COVID on women around the world at this time. So I'll send links, maybe share that with the group as well, because obviously we're going through challenging circumstances over here, but women all around the world are facing real challenges during this time. So, well, that brings us to an end. Thank you so much, Harriet. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you, and thanks for joining us and sharing your insights about productivity and resilience, and hearing more about your journey and experiences. It's been really terrific. Thank you so much. And so I will just round up by saying thank you to the audience and joining us today, and for all your contributions via chat. It's been great to have you here. We've got another, we're moving fast here. We've got another webinar on Monday where we're going to be talking about how to ace remote calls and events like this. So please do join us for that one if you haven't already signed up, and continue to let us know if there are any other speakers you would like us to host for these types of sessions, or any other ideas for SCL Women in Tech Law events. We're really keen to hear what you would like us to cover, because this is your network. Lastly, if you're not an SCL member and you've come today to join this session, then please do go to our website to learn more about becoming a member. And particularly if you're a student or a trainee, membership is free, and we'd love to have you join the organization. So thank you very much again for joining us today. Thank you, Harriet. I hope you go on to have a productive day, and me too. Yes, everyone have a very good day, and hope to see you all soon.
Bye all.
Thanks, Harriet. Take care. Bye-bye.